Hi everyone, welcome to Town Matters. This is a brief update about what's going on in Brattleboro town government. I'm Town Manager John Potter, and today we'll be giving you an overview of what happened at the Select Board's most recent regular meeting on Tuesday, June 16th, as well as what's on the agenda for the board's next meeting on Tuesday, July 7th. Finally, I'll mention a few announcements before wrapping things up. So at the meeting on June 16th, there were 7 items on the consent agenda, and in that consent agenda, they awarded a $19,309 bid to United Ag and Turf through Sourcewell for replacement of Recon Park's zero-turn mower, which was planned for and budgeted in the FY27 capital improvement plan. They approved 4 parade permits: the Brattleboro Goes 4th of July parade up Main Street, the Red Clover Rovers 4th of July road race from Living Memorial Park to the Common, the Cornguth Soapbox Derby, which will be held at the Exit 1 Industrial Park on Sunday, August 9th, and the Brattleboro Buddy Walk to be held on October 10th in the vicinity of the Common. Also on consent, the board approved a tobacco license and tobacco substitute endorsement permit for Elias & Son, Inc., the express fuel service at 37 Putney Road. And finally, they approved a first and third class liquor license and outside consumption permit for River and Rail Tavern located at 36 Bridge Street. Under regular business on June 16th, the board first heard from DPW Director Dan Tyler and Assistant DPW Director Pete Lynch about the fiscal year 2027 utility budget, so the budget for water and sewer. And after a brief discussion, the board made a motion to accept and adopt the capital plan and the fiscal year 27 utility budget as presented, and that passed by a vote of 5-0. Following that, DPW Director Dan Tyler stuck around to discuss an appeal of a utility bill for 18 High Lawn Road. Rory Brennan said that he got a bill that was 10 times his usual usage, that he checked with a plumber, and the plumber said there were no leaks. Director Tyler discussed the inspection and reading, and he reported that it read normal before, and the meter read normal since, and they have no explanation for the high water usage. There was a motion by the board to determine that the increased water usage on the property was an anomaly and to reduce the utility bill to its typical usage billing amount, and that passed 5-0. Next, the board had an update on the fiscal year 2026 budget through the end of April, and there was a brief discussion about revenues and a couple other things, and there was no motion required for that item. Next, the board took up its general priorities for the 2-year period 2026 through 2028. These resulted from the board's retreat, which was held at the end of April, and following a review of the materials from that retreat, the board made a motion to accept the following 2026 through 2028 Select Board priorities: create a budget that does not exceed 4%, generate additional revenue, focus on the need to fund road, sidewalk, and bicycle infrastructure, intentionally pursue economic development and vitality, and investigate a stormwater utility. And that motion passed by a vote of 5-0. Next, the board discussed its legislative priorities for 2027, and those were discussed and included lowering property taxes, building housing, promoting public safety, and prioritizing transportation. And they passed a motion by a vote of 5-0 to accept those 2027 legislative priorities. Next on the agenda was the Town Human Services Committee recommendations, and Human Services Committee Chair David Miner discussed that committee's new recommendations for human services funding allocation, and the board passed a motion 5-0 to accept that committee's revised allocations as presented. Following that, on June 16th, HR Director Sally Cruz-Nix updated the board on the firefighters union contract And following a brief discussion on that, the board approved the March 27, 2026 Memorandum of Understanding between the town of Brattleboro and the Brattleboro Professional Firefighters Association, Local 4439, for inclusion in the 3-year collective bargaining agreement that will run from July 1st, 2026 through June 30th, 2029. And that was approved by a vote of 5-0. Next, Director Nix updated the board on the police union contract, and there was a motion to approve the May 15th, 2026 Memorandum of Understanding between the town of Brattleboro and the United Federation of Police Officers, Local 412, for inclusion in a 1-year collective bargaining agreement for July 1st, 2026 through June 30th, 2027, and that passed by a vote of 5-0. And then the final item on June 16th was committee appointments. There was a slate of uncontested seats that was appointed by a vote of 5-0. I won't read through all of those, but they're available on the website. There was a contested appointments for the Arts Committee, the Town Arts Committee, which is very popular at the moment, and Abdullah Elan, Gregory Hankinson, and Olivia Loria Pombria were approved and appointed by the board to the Town Arts Committee. Congratulations to each of them, and thank you to everyone who applied to serve in a volunteer capacity for the town. The next select board meeting is a regular meeting on Tuesday, July 7th at 6:15 p.m. in the select board meeting room at 230 Main Street or on Zoom, and this is what will be on the agenda. On consent, the board will be looking at 13 items. There are a number of liquor licenses. First-class liquor license for Saffron, located at 487 Marlborough Road. One for Loveheart Larry's West River Cafe, located at 485 West River Road. A second-class liquor license, tobacco license, and tobacco substitute endorsement permit for Yazzy's Market, located at 328 Marlborough Road. A second-class liquor license renewal for KHP Drugs, known as Kinney Drugs, located at 499 Canal. 10 outside consumption permits for India Masala House, located at 7 High Street. And I think that is all the liquor and tobacco licenses. Then also on consent, by approving that agenda, the board would approve the town's records retention policy, which the town attorney has provided in the backup materials. They will consider approval of the award of the 2011 compact tractor replacement, which was approved in the FY27 capital budget, to Grassland Equipment of Latham, New York for $17,308. Also, a award of a contract to Formula Ford of Rutland, Vermont for the replacement of a 2015 Ford F-350, also for Rec and Parks Department, in the amount of $45,857 and includes a $14,000 trade-in value. Also on the consent, the board will approve an updated error and omission changes to the 2026 grand list, which is outlined in a spreadsheet attached in the board's backup materials. They'll be considering updating a contract with the Wyndham Solid Waste District, and they are considering the approval of the purchase of 2 utility vehicles that were in the FY27 capital plan, and I believe another plow vehicle for DPW. They also will be considering authorizing the DPW to proceed with the abandonment of 3 wells at the Retreat well field, to be done in accordance with the Vermont water supply rule, and contracting with Barry Miller Services for $41,295 to appropriately close out those wells, which are no longer needed. And finally, on consent, the board will consider accepting and appropriating $32,157 from the Opioid Settlement Fund statewide to establish a community training program through the Brattleboro Fire Department. Under regular business, first up is a landscape improvement proposal for the Exit 3 roundabout area, and proponents of this new design for that area will be coming to give a brief presentation, and the board will consider whether the town should collaborate and support these proposed upgrades out at Exit 3. Next, the Ethiopian Community Development Council, also known as ECDC, will join the meeting and discuss discuss their ongoing work supporting refugees in the area. Following that, the board will consider a collective bargaining agreement between the town and the United Steel, Paper, and Forestry, Rubber, Manufacturing, Energy, Allied Industrial, and Service Workers International Union, known to us by more of a shortcut as USW. And they'll consider a one-year collective bargaining agreement with that union for the period July 1st, 2026 through June 30th, 2027. Also on the agenda for July 7th is an update on potential housing developments on town-owned properties. Planning Director Sue Fillion will join the board and brief them on work that the Planning Department has been doing on housing. And following that, Planning Director Sue Fillion will stay in the meeting and talk about the vacant building ordinance, which was passed, I think, about a year ago now, and staff have made progress on implementing that ordinance, and Sue will tell the board about what has happened there. Next, the board will consider approval of the fiscal year 2027 tax rate, which implements the decisions made at the April 11, 2026 town meeting and decisions made by the state regarding the education rate. And after considering the tax rate, the board will hear from its EMS subcommittee. Select Board Member Heller and Mayo are going to talk about their work to consider a potential study on EMS. And they will also be requesting whether the board wants to formally dissolve that subcommittee. Then the board will be taking up a pretty significant topic. They learned this week that Brattleboro Memorial Hospital is planning to close its birthing center sometime over the next 6 to 9 months. This is a very important development for the town, and Select Board will be considering whether to write a letter of support for the work of this birthing center and whether to collaborate with relevant partners to advocate for its continuation and maintaining obstetric services in Brattleboro. And finally, on July 7th, the board will be making a number of committee appointments that were not known at the last meeting, and that is that meeting. Announcements: the town's curbside solid waste collection program will transition to a new service model starting Monday, July 6th, and we've talked about that a number of times on this broadcast. The biggest change is that recycling will move from weekly pickup to every other week. Trash collection will continue every other week, as it has been, and compost will continue to be collected weekly, and of course that will be done by the town staff now. You can read more about this transition at brattleboro.gov. A heat advisory is in effect in Brattleboro, so please exercise caution and be safe this 4th of July. Drink plenty of water and check on your neighbors and loved ones. You can find safety tips from the fire chief on the town's website, brattleboro.gov. Speaking of the 4th, there's a full schedule of events happening in town on Independence Day, including the Brattleboro Goes Forth Parade up Main Street, which starts at 10 a.m. From there, you can head over to Living Memorial Park, where there'll be activities and food trucks throughout the afternoon. And that evening, there'll be a free concert on the lower field with the Gaslight Tinkers at 7 p.m. and a fireworks display scheduled to begin around 9:30 p.m. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get podcasts, including Spotify and other major podcast platforms. You can catch the show on BCTV, as well as on the town's YouTube channel. We're also excited to announce that future episodes will air on WTSA 99.5 All News Radio. So thank you for listening. This podcast is put together to communicate in a different format about what's going on in town government. Please reach out to me at the town manager's office or townmanager@brattleboro.gov by email. As always, there's lots of additional information on the town website, brattleboro.gov, about what's discussed at the select board meeting, so please check in there for agendas, reports, and backup materials. Thanks for listening, and tune in again soon.